In this video, section 5.1, we're going to be talking about something called domain and range of a function. So first off, we need to determine what a function is. Believe it or not, you've actually been working with functions for a long time now. You've been working with what we call linear equations, but those linear equations are a type of function. And as we go through this chapter, hopefully you'll start seeing the parallels and how these things interact with one another. Now, the definition of a function goes like this. It is a relationship that pairs each input with exactly one output. So there's some words in there that doesn't make sense, and it's the concepts of input and output. So let's just talk about those first. Input, it's the variable, usually x is what we usually denote as our input, and that's the number or the variable that we plug in a function. This is also, and this is very important, this input also goes by another name. It's called the independent variable, and you have probably heard of this term in probably your science studies, especially when we go into science experiments and stuff like that, and determining your independent variable and how this affects something else. If you remember that from science, it's very similar. And matter of fact, it's almost identical. This is the independent variable in which we manipulate. And that brings us to the next thing, our output, which is the variable we usually consider this y normally, that we get from the function, also called the dependent variable. So this is what I want you to understand. And I'm going to just kind of write something off to the side. So if I give you something like this, I'm telling you that this is a function, and there's a reason for it, but don't go into that. This is what we have. This guy right here is our input. We would put the x in, and once we put the x in, we would solve for y. So the input would be x and the output would be y. The independent variable would be x and the dependent variable would be y. Y cannot change unless x does, and it's that same concept, like I said, that you probably learned in some of your science classes by this time. Now, that brings us to the next two terms in this is domain. This is really easy if you can just keep this in. Domain is all possible input values. So basically, you're looking at all the x's, and range is all possible output values, basically all the y values. All right, so there's different ways that you may see functions, and this is just a couple of examples of the most common that you're going to see is basically a graph. This right here is a function, and as you can see, we have some dots going on here. And this is a type of function. Actually, more specifically, it's a type of relationship, but it is a type of function as well. And we'll get into that more later on into a chapter about how to determine if a relationship is a function. But just know this is a function. All right, same thing here. I have a function for you. And notice that it says 3, 6, 9, 12, and then I have some numbers here. Notice this. All the x's in this thing are different, and that's a very big deal because that's part of the definition of function, that each input value has exactly one output. So this 3 has only one output. This x has a 0. This x of 6 has an output of -3. And notice that I'm using these words interchangeably, and there's a reason for it, because this x value right here of 3 is my input value. It is my independent variable. And this y value is my output variable. It is my dependent variable. So all these terms get used interchangeably. So another one that you will see and you're used to are ordered pairs. So this is another type of function. Again, notice how each of the x's are completely and utterly different. All right. Now, the next one would be a map diagram. And so we would have these represents my x and these represent my y. Notice how each x only goes to one number. Even though these two x's share the same y, that's okay. Each x has a number only by itself. If I had drawn something like this, and you'll see this, we'll give this in a little bit later on. If I had done this, and drawn a 1, done that where this is going to both of them, and this represents x and this represents y, this would not be a function. But don't worry about that too much right now. Everything that we're doing in this video and in this section 5.1, they are all functions, and we'll get into that a little bit later about telling the difference. So let's get into the main part of this video. It says find the domain and range. Well, domain, according to our definition, it is all possible x values, or all possible input values, or all possible independent variables. All those things are the same thing. With that being said, it's the x value. So if we were looking at these 3 dots right here, we're just going to look at the x value. So this particular dot right here has an x value of 1. This one has an x value of 2. And this one has an x value of 3, because we're reading this like an ordered pair. And that's my domain for these 3 points. That's it. It's just the x values. So now let's look at the range. The range is the same concept. I am going to look for them. So I'm going to go here. Well, the range on this happens to be 1. The range for this one happens to be 3. And the range for this happens to be 5. And that's it. So for those 3 specific dots, I'm writing down what the x value is and what the y value is. Same thing for this one, my domain. And the way, if you noticed it, I've gone and did the domain and the range in order. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to kind of go from left to right from looking at my range. So, and my domain. So right here, I'm going to start with my domain. My first x that I see on the left side is going to be -4. Then the next one would be a -2. The next one would be a -4, because not -4, but a 0, sorry. And the next one would be 2. And the next one would be a +4. So that would be the x value here, x value here, x value here, x value here, x value here. And I didn't realize I was off screen. So that's what we have. Have -4, -2, the x value 0, x value 2, x value +4. So that is literally my domain. Now I need to find my range. And we want to start when we do our range from least to greatest. So we would start from the low part of our graph and we work up. Now look at this. This lowest number right here is my lowest point, and that happens to be -4. The next one, see how these two are literally on sharing the same y? Well, we only have to write it one time. We don't have to write it twice because they are the same range. So we only need that -2, and that's it. And then the last one right here would be 0, because these points both share the same y value of 0. And that's my range. There's nothing more to it. Okay? Next one. Again, this is a function. I am telling you it's a function. Don't worry about any other thing other than the fact that it is a function because I have said so. And it tells me to complete the input-output table. Then find the domain and range of the function represented by the data. Well, this is pretty easy. I'm giving you a function. I am giving you the x value. I am giving you the input value. I am giving you the independent variable. And your job is to basically plug things in so that we could do so. So I can say 2 times -2 minus 5. And I get -9. And I can continue to work that whole problem out. And that would be -7. That would be -5. And this would be a -3. Now, my job is next is to find the domain. Well, the domain is easy. It's already written out for me. -2, -1, 0, and 1. So the next piece of this is finding the range. Well, that's easy as well. Once we filled out this table, it's basically just looking at the outputs or the dependent variables. So my range is -9, -7, -5, and -3. And then you would do the same thing for number 4. So why don't you try number 4 on your own? All right, so for number 4, you should have gotten this in your table for your y variable, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And then looking at your domain, it was pretty straightforward. Just plug it, basically already given it to you, 0, 2, 4, and 6. Now, this is the thing. When you went to find your range, you may just instinctively wrote 3, 2, 1, 0. However, technically, when we write range, we always, in domain, we always go from least to greatest. So really, the range is 1, 2, 3. A little bit of a minor squabble, yes, I know, but remember that when you're writing your domain and range, make sure that you are writing it from least to greatest. It's just a simple definition. All right, so let's look at number 5. Number 5 states that a factory that makes frozen pies produce 300 pies per minute is asking us to write an equation that represents the number of pies made each hour. All right, so our job is, if we wanted to kind of put this together, we know we want to find y. It's going to be pies, or the number of pies, and we know that x is going to be per hour, but we've got a little bit of a situation. I've said this times before in class and in videos. When you see something that says like pies made each hour, you can just kind of simply say that they're multiplying. It's like pies per hour. So this is going to represent our number of pies. This is going to be our number of hours. So how many pies are they making an hour? Well, we need to stop and look. This thing says 300 per minute. That's not an hour. So we need to find out how many pies are being made an hour. And that's pretty easy. We know that they're making 300 pies per minute, and we know that there are 60 minutes to an hour. So we can determine that they're making 18,000 pies an hour. That's a lot of pies. So we've just found out our very basic equation, our very basic function. And now that you've done that, it's just a matter of plugging things in. So create an input-output table for the equation in part A. Use inputs 1, 2, 4, 8, and 10. Well, basically all you're doing is creating a table just like this. Nothing complicated. 1, 2, 4, 8, and 10. And this is where I'm actually going to stop the video. Your job now is to basically fill out the rest of this table, and then for C, find the domain and range of the function. It's pretty self-explanatory. Remember that when you write your domain and range, that you're always going from least to greatest. And that's it for this video. This is pretty straightforward. Shouldn't be too terribly difficult. Just remember 2 things. When I ask for the domain, I want all possible x values, the input values, the independent variables. If I'm asking for range, I want all possible y values, the output values, the dependent variables. Thus, the main definition of what domain and range is for now. All right, and I'm done with this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.